I did something crazy. Maybe the most reckless thing I've ever done in my life. I applied for a job I was completely unqualified for. No experience. No expertise. Not a single relevant skill. And I knew that very well. But I still did it because I had no other choice. At that time, I had been unemployed for over 4 months. In the beginning, I was still optimistic. It's only temporary, I'll find something soon. But then, week after week passed and I still hadn't gotten a single call. My inbox was empty. And my bank account was no longer smiling. I looked at my personal expense sheet the way one looks at a crack slowly spreading across glass. Rent was due in less than a week. I had exactly $300 left. Every time I opened the fridge, I sighed. I had cut every unnecessary expense, but even that wasn't enough to stop the fear from creeping in. That was when I saw a new job posting. An office position, decent salary, didn't sound too complicated. I read the job description carefully. 2 to 3 years of experience required, in a field I had only vaguely heard of a few times. I should have scrolled past it. I should have known my place. But that day, for some reason, I didn't. I had nothing left to lose. I was tired of waiting, tired of doing everything right and still getting nowhere. So I hit apply. Maybe I'd be rejected. Maybe I wouldn't even make it past the first round. But I still had one slim chance. A gamble. A shot in the dark. A final hope from someone slowly sinking to the bottom. If you've ever been unemployed for a long time, you'll understand time doesn't flow the same. Every day feels the same. Wake up, open your laptop, send out applications, and receive silence in return. Over and over again, until you start questioning not just your ability, but your worth. 4 months without work, I experienced every emotion. From hope, to anxiety, to disappointment, and finally numbness. At first, I carefully polished every line of my CV, wrote cover letters like love confessions. But after dozens of unanswered applications, it all became mechanical: copy, paste, send. I started avoiding friends. Replied to texts with things like, just taking a short break, a few opportunities coming up soon. In reality, there weren't any. Only the bills kept coming. I avoided my parents because I didn't want them to worry. I even feared myself, feared the empty look in the mirror. I began to imagine worse things. Borrowing money, sinking into debt, maybe even moving back home with nothing. The freedom I once had was being drained away, day by day. And I just stood there, helpless, watching it disappear. Then one day, while I was scrolling through job boards like I always did, I saw it, that job posting. It looked like every other listing except for one thing. I wasn't qualified for it. 2 to 3 years of experience? I didn't even have 2 to 3 days in that field. I should have ignored it. Anyone in my position would have ignored it. But I didn't. I clicked to read the details. And for some reason, for the first time in weeks, I felt my heart beat faster. Right after hitting apply, I just sat there, staring at the screen with a hollow feeling in my chest. Honestly, I didn't expect anyone to call back. But 3 days later, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. A soft voice came through. "Hello, we were really impressed with your resume. Could you come in for an interview Monday morning?" I froze for a few seconds. They wanted to meet me? Not because I had the experience, but probably because I knew how to write a resume that sounded believable. From that moment on, I had one goal only: don't get found out. I threw myself into studying like a desperate man. From Google to YouTube, Reddit to ChatGPT, if it had information, I was there. I took notes on every concept, practiced explaining technical terms I'd only skimmed before. I wasn't learning to truly understand. I was learning to sound like I did. The night before the interview, I couldn't sleep. I sat in front of the mirror, practicing how to smile, how to nod just confidently enough. I rehearsed saying things like, "In my previous experience," even though inside, I was empty. The next morning, I walked into the company building. My hands were soaked with sweat, but my eyes had to look sharp. I forced myself to stay calm, shook the interviewer's hand with the most professional air I could muster. The interview felt like a mental chess game. I dropped phrases like process optimization, task automation, workflow efficiency. Stuff I had just crammed the night before, but said as if it were my native language. I walked out with mixed feelings. I wasn't sure if I'd nailed it, or just committed professional suicide. Then, the next day, I got the email. Congratulations, you've been hired. On my first day, I wore the best dress shirt I owned. My hands were trembling, but I kept my face calm. I took a deep breath outside the office building and walked in as if I was born to do this job. But inside, it felt like walking a tightrope. From the very first hour, I knew I was in too deep. People were saying things I only half understood, sometimes not at all. They used tools, software, and jargon that I had only heard of the night before. Everything spun like a whirlwind, and I was just trying to keep up, like someone left behind in a race. I learned to survive by opening 20 browser tabs every day. One for ChatGPT, where I asked the questions I didn't dare ask coworkers. Others for Stack Overflow, Reddit, YouTube tutorials. I took notes on every step, every command, every error, and how to fix them. I wasn't just working. I was acting. I smiled at the right moments, nodded when I had to, and always said, "I'll handle it right away." Then rushed back to my desk to figure out how to actually handle it. The strange thing was, no one suspected a thing. On the contrary, my manager praised me for picking things up quickly. A coworker even said, "No one here understands the system as well as you do." I wanted to laugh. And I was scared. I knew I was faking it. I wasn't good enough. I was just outrunning fear one day at a time. But somehow, I was still hanging on. Each passing day was another I managed to survive. And somewhere in that chaos, a small part of me began to believe, maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't get found out. Not today. Not tomorrow. As long as I kept running. I used to think I could only fake it forever, just stay clever enough that no one would notice. But then a moment came. A small shift. And I realized I had started learning for real. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was stuck with a repetitive task, tedious, mechanical, and worst of all, nobody else on the team wanted to touch it. I opened a ChatGPT tab like usual, but this time, not just for a quick fix. I asked, "Is there a way to automate this part?" I spent nearly 2 hours testing, debugging, and reviewing. And when it finally ran smoothly, when I watched that data flow on its own, my heart raced. Not from fear this time, but from pride. The next day, I presented that solution to the team. It was just a small improvement, but everyone was surprised. My manager looked at me, squinted, and smiled. "Well done. This part's been neglected for a long time." From then on, I started to feel a little more confident. I wasn't just copying and pasting anymore. I began to understand why the code was written that way, why the system had to run the way it did. I started suggesting small changes, and some of them were accepted. I was still afraid. Every day at work still felt like stepping onto a mental battlefield. But that fear no longer dragged me down. On the contrary, it pushed me forward. I realized I wasn't pretending to understand anymore. I was learning. I was adapting. And I was growing. I don't know when I'll truly be worthy of this job. But at least now, I'm no longer running from it. It's been nearly a month since I first walked into this job, with trembling hands and a head full of crash course buzzwords. Now every morning I still open my laptop with a bit of anxiety. I still keep ChatGPT and Stack Overflow tabs open like trusted companions. But one thing has changed. I no longer feel like an imposter. I still don't know everything, and maybe I won't for a while. But I've stopped pretending. The questions I ask now go deeper than the ones I started with. The answers I give aren't copied from the internet anymore. They come from real experience. Sometimes I sit in meetings, listening to colleagues discuss things, and suddenly realize I understand what they're talking about. Not just understand, I can contribute. I've become part of the conversation, instead of the outsider scrambling to catch up. I used to fear being found out. But now, I no longer feel the need to hide. Because what's kept me here isn't pre-existing knowledge. It's the effort I put in every day to learn. I'm still scared, of course. Who isn't? But that fear isn't the enemy anymore. It's my fuel. It reminds me I'm moving in the right direction. I don't know if I've truly made it yet. But I know one thing for sure. I've never felt this afraid and this alive at the same time. And maybe that's how people grow, by stepping into what they're not ready for and becoming someone they never thought they could be.